Hello, and welcome back to Video Sunday School. Thank you guys for your continued support of watching on YouTube, and for those of you that showed up in person. And as things are cranking up in a safe way, that's pretty cool. Glad you guys were able to do that. And for those of you that weren't, I certainly honor that as well. But we were out of town, so didn't have a chance one way or the other. But all of the different ways that you are supporting the ongoing work of your church is pretty cool, and important that it happen and continue in all of the venues, because everybody's needs are different, and being able to express that in different ways is important. And I think that's pretty neat that everyone can be a part of that. The scripture reading today is Psalm 89. I'm using the NIV here, and Psalm 89, verses 1 through 4 and 15 through 18. 89, 1 through 4, 15 to 18, because there was a jet going over. I didn't know if you could hear that there. I will sing the Lord's great love forever. With my mouth I will make your faithfulness known through all generations. I will declare that your love stands firm forever, that you established your faithfulness in heaven itself. You said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to David my servant. I will establish your line forever, and will make your throne firm through all generations. Blessed are those who have learned to acclaim you, who walk in the light of your presence, O Lord. They rejoice in your name all day long. They exult in your righteousness. For you are their glory and strength, and by your favor you exalt our horn. Indeed, our shield belongs to the Lord, our King, to the Holy One of Israel. And there are two things that really stand out in the verses there, and especially when you look at it, those two sections sort of as a digest for the whole. But it begins talking about God's covenant being connected in the heavenly realms. That it's not just a secular thing, but that it's a heavenly thing. It's not just a worldly commitment, but that God made the commitment and ratified it in heaven, as if to say that the nature of it transcends the earthly, which you can see further down, as I've mentioned many times, that the gospel writers were all about the fact that that the kingdom Jesus was setting about, God's kingdom, wasn't just an earthly kingdom. It was something that could shake the very foundations of the earth, because it transcended the earthly. It's God's kingdom which makes it one that's rooted not in the earth but in heaven, so that the very the beginnings of it, but the very nature of God's kingdom is that it's a heavenly kingdom, and that we get to participate in it here. But in doing so, it changes the very fabric of nature. And in so doing, that we become part of what God is doing. And when we do that, it changes the way we relate to the fallen world. The world is a fallen place, but we're to relate to it in a way that elevates it. So that later on, when it said, blessed are those who have learned to acclaim you, that walk in your presence. They rejoice in your name and exalt in your righteousness. Blessed are those. The blessing comes from the fact that through worship of God, through the earthly worship, and notice that it's not just the one day a week thing that you're doing, that it's the all day long thing, that our natures, as Paul certainly was emphatic about that our natures are reborn through our submission to Christ. That as we become conscious citizens of God's kingdom, people who are working actively on behalf of God's kingdom, who are part of what God's all about, in that sense, we change our allegiance from here to there, and doing that, we're agents of God here on earth. But that doesn't. That means that it's not a part-time thing. That our connection to God has to be 24/7, and so that as we learn to express that, the blessing comes as we have aligned ourselves to who God is. Just like if you take a magnet and you bang on it a lot, you can, now this only works with iron magnets, it doesn't work with newer magnets like the neodymium or ceramic magnets that you can get. But if you take an older iron magnet and you bang on it a lot, you can demagnetize it, because magnetization is when all of the electrons are facing in the same direction, and then they suck at metals that can be magnetized, which includes a wider range than a normal weak magnet can do, because like aluminum, nickel, and cobalt, alnico magnets are, none of those are generally ones that you think can be magnetized, but if you put them together and put them in a strong magnetic current, they become very strong magnets. And iron can be remagnetized after it's been banged and all of the electrons have been misaligned, so that when they're all aligned, it's magnetic all the time. It doesn't just turn on and off like an electromagnet does. They're permanent magnets, and they stay magnetized no matter what, so that the electricity that you have when you turn on is because there are these huge magnets in the generating facility, and whatever's turning that coil through the magnets is making the electrons flow, and here we are because of the alignment of those electrons. And they're always like that. It's always a magnet, and it's always doing its thing. And in that same way, blessed are those who've learned to worship God in all that they do in their everyday life, to be God's people, to be a citizen of God's kingdom in the whole realm of your life, which means that the worship is expressed in a lot of different ways, but is always effectively being God's person. Now that doesn't mean you go around, singing hymns in the grocery store. You can, but that's not saying that you have to do that, because worship God means to exclaim and make clear God's worth. Worthship means exclaiming the worth of something. So when we worship God with all we are, the whole time, we are ones who, in our attitudes and in our outlook and in our general choices and in our interactions, are ones that make clear who God is to us all the time. So it's obviously then it's a misnomer that you could go to church on Sunday and then go curse out somebody on your way out. You haven't declared your citizenship one place and then rescinded it somewhere else. The worship of God was supposed to be ingrained in us, because back to the fact that that God's worship isn't something that's surface, isn't just a veneer over it. God's kingdom penetrated to the very depths of the earth and all the way up to heaven. Us being a citizen of that kingdom isn't a part-time thing, isn't something that just comes and goes, that we can, put on like a Sunday coat. It has to be who we are. And of course, if it's not who you are and you're just acting that way because it, seems like a convenient thing, you're not really doing yourself any favors by doing that. To just declare your allegiance and then go do whatever you want the rest of the time. The whole deal with being part of God's kingdom is that as we ourselves are transformed into God's people, into God's agents, we're able to receive those blessings from God because of who we are, because of our citizenship, because of the the very nature of where our identity is rooted. So the psalmist recognized that that it's something that is who we are, but also isn't something that happens immediately. The psalmist said, "Blessed are those who have what? Who have learned to acclaim you." That the fact that we get it wrong, I certainly have gotten it wrong, and still do, because it's not something that when we're not living in the heavenly realm itself, and it's not something that is in our nature to do. It's something we need to learn to do. It's something we need to learn to do on a regular basis. It's just like, I still remember when I was a little kid, my grandmother was an Episcopalian, and as a matter of fact, she's helped start St. Richard's Church. She had gone to All Saints downtown. Downtown is right over there, and All Saints is right over there. And they said, I guess when they were starting it, they said, okay, some of you that live near where All Saints is going to be, we need, or where St. Richard's is going to be, we're cranking it up, and we need you to go over there, be a Episcopalian over there. So she did, and she helped, crank things up over there. And I remember as a little kid, pretty young, going and sitting there with her, and that was when you had the Book of Common Prayer, but it had all of the different colored, it must have had 6 or 7 different ribbons to keep your place in there. And of course it did that because there was a lot going on with it. They didn't put the hymn numbers, or they put the hymn numbers up there, but they didn't announce them. And they didn't put the reading numbers, they didn't announce the reading numbers, and they didn't have a bulletin. It was just the reading numbers told you the numbers, the hymn numbers told you the numbers. Your job was to find where they were, and then as soon as they started singing, they didn't say turn to page 352. Dude just got up there and started singing whatever the song was, and it was your job to get that page. They told you. Well, I was lost within minutes of the service, and it was up to my grandmother to sit there and patiently say, no, we're on 352 now. Oh, now it's in the front. We're on page 97. Oh, well, now we're back to 632. And it took a while, or it would have taken a while, because we started Loma right after that. But it took a while to learn how to do that, how to worship in that context. It takes a while to learn how to truly worship here 24/7 in this context. So even though we're citizens of God's kingdom, we have to learn how to act like citizens of God's kingdom, which takes practice. And hopefully we do that. The psalmist certainly knew that it was something that wasn't a thing that came naturally to us. It's a thing that was difficult and yet necessary. Not natural, but vital to us and to the world. Because the whole deal with God establishing God's kingdom on earth, a heavenly kingdom, was to make it so that everybody could be a part of that kingdom, could be invited into the kingdom and to be a part of it, which meant that our job in actively being citizens of God's kingdom means, A, to make it winsome to other people so that they wouldn't say, why would I want to do that? But also to actively invite people to be a part of that kingdom so that they can enjoy the benefits, they can enjoy the blessings, they can be God's people too. And that's something that we are meant to take seriously and do in our everyday lives. That worship is something we do to exclaim our pleasure at being God's people and the reality of us being God's people, and even more than that, to continually establish the beachhead here so that people are ready when we go to be there permanently, so that they can partake as well. So the psalmist wanted you and me to sing God's song actually and metaphorically. Actually, when we go to worship, or when we're sitting on our couch watching the worship service, to sing God's songs, but also to sing them here wherever we are, so that we're those receiving and giving God's blessing in the world, being His people, which God allows us to do. And that's pretty cool, that He wants us in His kingdom, and He wants us to be a part of it always. I'm grateful for the opportunity for the practice, and that God cuts me slack when I don't get it right. But that's what the forgiveness is for, and I appreciate that. Thank you all for once again being part of it, being part of Sunday school, for showing up, and for helping each other, for continuing that connection that's so important. And I love you guys. Keep those cards and letters coming, and I thank you very much for your citizenship in God's kingdom and your continued work on the churches and on God's behalf. Thanks.